Folks, thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to introduce, welcome back, Eran Riklis, the director of the film. And she needs no introduction. You've been staring at her for the last hour and a half, and we'll be staring at her all week. Neta Riskin. Neta, thank you so much for being here. Today. Sit there, here. We'll move around. There you go.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this film. I have a lot of questions, but I also want to leave some for the audience. I'll let them talk about the plot questions they have, who's against who the good guys were, who the bad guys were. I want to. Who knows? Yeah. The deeper stuff really for me is what inspired this? Where did this come from? Why was it important for you to make this film?
Well, I was inspired by a short story by a supposedly ex-Mossad agent who wrote it under some kind of different name. I read it back in the late 80s, actually. It was part of a compilation of short stories. And then a few months later, I discovered it was actually written by a woman called Shulamit Har-Even, who was a very famous writer in Israel. And she wrote it because I think her husband, who I later met, was actually in the Mossad, but even that, who knows. So I was inspired by it back then, and then many years later again, because I felt it satisfies both my need to yet again try and make some sense of the Middle East, which is not easy, from a very personal point of view. I felt again that I had two women here, which, following the Syrian Bride and Lemon Tree especially, I felt that I can somehow survive getting into some kind of point of view, feminine point of view. So barely survive, but I can survive. And yet, and on the other hand, it does satisfy my, I think like all of us, we all like a good thriller, we all like a good kind of John le Carré style story. So I felt there's an interesting balance here between those two elements, and it took me a long time to actually face the story, take it forward. The actual story is very, very short, and she just dies in the end, and that's it. So I had to take it further and actually try and really adapt the story to the current state. And even though we always say nothing really changes, and yet I think in the last certainly 10, 20 years, we are seeing a different political and kind of a different political world and different notion of terror being closer than ever on a daily basis, wherever you are. You don't have to be in the Middle East for that, as we all sadly know. So all these elements felt comfortable and good, and there I was.
And then Neta comes in. Neta, tell me a little bit about how you prepared for this role. What kind of preparation? I find, and this is actually in a way for both of you, but yes, this is a Mossad film, a thriller film. It's very much bringing in a woman's perspective. There's a lot of women themes here: fertility, motherhood, and just this relationship, this bond between these two women, which I think couldn't have been told possibly in the same way with two men. One can argue. But tell me a little bit about what brought you to it and where you got to it. Let's start with
first of all, regarding the preparation. So, of course, I met a few Mossad agents that have told me a bit about what this job entails and what it takes to be a real Mossad agent, not a James Bond kind of person. And this is, as opposed to what people think, it's being very quiet and silent and not noticeable and not James Bondish kind of person. So those people are probably the last person you would expect them to be, or you wouldn't even notice they've been in the room. They're so transparent. So this is a very, they're gray people, okay? For example, the one who I would have told you is a Mossad agent, you would say, could never.
Who in this room right now, sir?
Yeah. Who's the most gray person in the room? So that's probably you. So that was the first thing. Then, since she also has her fertility problem, so I've done a research what it takes, what's the emotional journey that a person goes when she goes through this kind of thing. But also what you've said, which this is, I think, the most important thing in the movie, this kind of stories is usually being told from a manly point of view. I mean, it's usually a man who's an agent. The woman is usually the sidekick. She's waiting at home. Sometimes he calls her and she's saying, "When are you back?" And he says, "I don't know, I'm just running some errands," and he's never back. So this is usually a man's story. So that was very, very interesting. I don't know. Twist, yeah. To tell this story, to put the women in the center and not the men. Although these women are still run by men. I mean, it is still a man's world in which the women are taking part of. Yeah, no, not because of us, but because of this job. But the focus is not on the men; it's on the women that are being played with and so on.
And lied to, actually.
I think all the men are pretty despicable in this film, actually, and there's only two redeeming characters.
Isn't there a movie like that?
Avner is nice, I think.
Yeah, Avner's nice. Well, the men are. It's actually complex because if you look at the bad guy, the Hezbollah guy, he has a story. It's not, yet again.
And he's a very nice person in real life.
Yeah, but he's dead, Neta. I have to tell you that. Okay, you shot him. Yeah. Twice.
He's not despicable. He's really nice.
We've shown a few films of him here. Yeah. He's always playing a nice guy. Yeah. This is his first time as a bad guy.
It was important for me to actually bring somebody who looks good and has. There is a certain, you understand. There's a backstory there. There's a complicated backstory. It's not, another portrayal of an Arab terrorist, the way it's normally portrayed especially in Hollywood. But even that, I think all the characters are I hope, are multi-layered, even if they only pop up for, a few minutes. There's a story there somewhere in the background, which I think is always the case. We're used to such black and white portrayals of everything. And I think the role of cinema, in a way, and of literature, and certainly the press, but I think the press is probably the weakest in that sense, is to really try and discover the color behind everything. And the multi-layers, and when sometimes I feel, in my better moments, I feel like a painter, and then it's really about, painting this wide canvas and trying to really convey something which you don't necessarily get at the first moment. There's always another layer to discover, and it's it's making the complexity understandable, let's say.
Let me ask one more question before we open it to some questions from the audience. Goldschifter, did I correctly pronounce her name?
The first one.
Who got it right? I got it right, the name? That was it. That was my only question. No.
Yeah, that's the way.
She was banned from Iran. First of all, I'd love to know about the choice of casting in general. There's plenty of other actresses in Israel and Europe, but an Iranian actress who was banned for being in an American film, in Ridley Scott's film,
following that film,
wanted to take it one step further and be in an Israeli film in order to get into even more trouble with the
I'm sweating
the Iranian government. Tell us about this a little bit.
Well, I have to tell you something. The first thing or the second thing or the third thing she said to me was, if I say no to this film, it means we are all afraid, and we cannot be afraid. You have to face a certain truth. You have to you have to sort of say we are here to offer a different option in terms of collaboration between people who are on paper are the worst of enemies. And of course, we're film people. We come from with a good cause. Let's say, so it's not like enemies meeting across the battlefield, but it was very risky on her part because, whatever way you look at it, and it's not like I always tell her, okay, we're not in immediate danger when we walk down the street together, right? And we're not. But who knows, on the other hand. So I think she was brave. She had something to say. She was, I had a lot of dilemmas because, she's not Palestinian, she's not Lebanese. She's Iranian. The Iranians are not exactly Arabs. It's all very complex. But on the other hand, I felt that her sensitivity and her complexity and just the fact that I think she's a very, very good actress and very different, I think, from Neta, which was really about, for me, this was about bringing this flamboyant red robe into a very old-fashioned, cursed, as she says, apartment in Hamburg that once belonged to Jewish people who were deported and never came back. And to bring an Israeli agent who is at once, like Neta said, she's seamless, and yet she has a very deep and fascinating character and a lot of, moral dilemmas and issues with her life. And she's very strong, but although it doesn't seem that way. And I think, this putting both of these women together in this apartment was really the biggest challenge. And I felt that as actresses, the minute I learned to know them a bit, I felt it was really the right choice.
And Neta, for you spent so much intimate time with her. How was that relationship? How was the working relationship? Was there any kind of cultural divide?
Not really. I mean, it is. I've never met Iranian people. I mean, because it's more than a border between us. So it was I was very curious about it because I've never spoken to an Iranian person, never met anyone in person. So it was just curiosity at the beginning. But then, I mean, usually people are very much alike once they're in the same, doing the same job. I mean, we were both actors. We come from the same kind of world. We share same interests, hobbies, point of views. I mean, there's more similarity than difference. So I think so. No, Eran?
I can tell you. Maybe I never told you this, but maybe I did. But in the first day when we got together for our first rehearsal, it was in Paris. At lunchtime, I think I made a note to myself, this is never going to work.
Really? Why?
Well, various reasons, I can't tell you.
Really?
But it was interesting. I think purely from a professional point of view, it was really a clash, a very quiet one, between two...
We work very different.
Yeah, they work very differently, and it was very apparent across the table. And then I realized, okay, my job is to at once maintain that, because that's actually the story. These are two people who come, even though they serve the same cause, so to speak, but not really. They come from a totally different background and have a totally different personality. So I wanted at once to maintain that, and yet, it's always the dilemma when you're working with actors. You want to bring them together, to be close and to really bond while you're making the film, and yet you want to leave enough secrets and mystery to explore while you're filming. And I think we managed to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful parts of the film is really how disconnected they are, how different they are, and yet how they manage to make a connection, and that definitely works from my perspective.
Yes.
Let's take a few questions from the audience. We'll have microphones go around.
Can I say something before we do the questions? I just want to acknowledge one person here because... not because he was born on the same day as I was, but because he's been part of my films for some years now. And he's my cousin, Ira, who's sitting back there, very humble and quiet. And you saw his credit, executive producer, and that is his credit. Executive producer, he's supported this film and other films. And so I just want to say thank you again in this forum. Thanks. Now to the Q&A.
Hi, excuse me. I just realized I've got laryngitis from allergies, not contagious. So,
you sure?
Yes. Anyway, I love The Syrian Bride, and I love the film tonight. Thank you very much. Everybody was excellent.
Thank you.
Did I miss something in my imagination? I always thought that they would probably have her still be alive in the end, some kind of a twist. And then when I saw the caskets leave the home, I said, I don't even think she would be in a casket. I just felt that she wasn't really killed, the Mona character. And in the end, when she was with her little boy, like going into Canada, was this a fantasy or was it something what did I miss? How did that happen?
I told you there'd be plot questions.
Yes. I get this question a lot. My answer is, if you saw The Syrian Bride, you probably had the same question, how did the bride get across the border? nobody opened the gate for her. But she did it here. I think it's all about the mind. I think it's all about overcoming certain boundaries and borders within yourself. Now, was the Mossad really clever enough and amazing enough in a way to actually organize this whole thing, get her out, lie to Nomi, get her to do the job out of revenge, out of a sense of duty, kill the guy in Lebanon at very high risk, come back, still they lied to her, and Mona got away, and she knows about it now because she hears this message. Option one. Option two, she wasn't in that casket. I don't know. I can't. Well, maybe I know, but you have to torture me. But you didn't miss anything. I think that's one of the points was really to. I think the way it is, you always hear these stories about things that happen, and you think that what you read about is what really happened, and then you discover the next day, the next week, the next year, in 30, in 100 years, you discover a different truth. And I think this whole film is about, lies, secrets and lies, and what is the truth, and how far can you extend it, and so it's really, I think people want to think that the Mossad is really probably what it is, then they did an amazing job. On the other hand, maybe they totally messed it up, and then maybe Mona devised this whole thing. Maybe this Kurdish guy, the Jew of the Arab world, maybe he did his part. I mean, he obviously did. He obviously was part of this scheme. But also it could be really, I also truly believe that this could be Nomi standing back at her apartment and just wishful thinking.
Did I understand the plot correctly that it appeared that Avner for the Mossad abandoned his heroine?
That who, sorry?
That Avner abandoned his heroine. He said he was going to get her out to Tel Aviv the next morning, and he disappeared.
I can tell you as a writer, I can tell you that the whole idea was to actually get the best out of Nomi, when putting her under pressure, and
it's like squeezing a lemon.
It's like almost like squeezing a lemon. It's basically it's one hit after the other. She comes back to the apartment. She seems what you're not sure who's that person lying there dead in the kitchen. Then she sees television. There's a report. Avner says, we are basically everything is out of control. We have to get you out of here. But then she feels betrayed because suddenly her face is on television, on national German television. So what is going on? Avner doesn't answer. The Kurdish guy says, well, you have to go underground, but I'm taking care of you now. And you do what you do. You go to sleep, you think about it. We'll see in the morning. If you think you have to do what is the right thing for you to do, I'll help you.
I read a lot about agents and their handlers. It's called handlers, right? And usually the handlers, they have a very clear psychological analysis of the agent. They know more about the agent than the agent know about himself. They know how he acts, what drives him, what motivates him, how to manipulate him. So it could be that they really know Nomi better than she knows herself. The things that she's doing out of what she would say, how do you say it? Forgot even the Hebrew word, so I don't know what I want to say. It's the thing out of her, what she thinks is instincts. They already know she's gonna act that way, so they know how to manipulate her. That's not only. It's not only for Nomi. I mean, handlers know their agents better than the agents know themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll take one last question over here.
Last? We're just starting.
You want more?
Hi, I just love this ambiguity in the end, because I also felt like she did that. Was she alive? Was she dead? But the thing I wanted to know is, did Lena, was she part of this conspiracy to get Nomi to go to Lebanon to kill the terrorist? Was that because she said, you must go and get my son, promise me. There would have been no other reason for her to go because she promised her. So then in my mind, she would have been part of that conspiracy. At least she got her justice in the end from that point of view.
Yeah. I think it's more or less the same answer in the sense that I believe she was part of this, but maybe she's dead. You know, you
I know
don't
this
really know.
but I love that.
What occurred to me, it's actually funny. I saw the film a few weeks ago in some screening. I can't remember where, and in London. And it suddenly occurred to me, English-wise, that what Lena says is, promise me you'll take him out, which actually means also take him out, Naeem.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. It's funny, you know, how words are so tricky. Take him out means finish him off, kill him. But she actually meant the boy, of course. So it's interesting, you know, you see the film 1,000 times and you go through it. Yeah. So,
Okay, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
She wore red.
Yes.
And in my mind, again, red is not something you'd wear if you want to be hiding and not conspicuous.
Well, in the
And
apartment, you know.
What
It was the
your
one thing I'll tell
rationale?
you what, the red element is the one thing I really protected from the original short story, because there was something about the way Mona was, she wasn't even called Mona, I can't remember the original name, but the way she was described opening the door with this red robe, I said, I have to keep this. There's something about it. And, you know, on a simplistic level, red signifies danger. In every Hitchcock film, if it was in color, somebody in red means, okay, somebody's going to die very soon. So for me, it was important. I have to tell you, just as a side story, is that it took us 2 months, I think, even more, to actually get the robe right. It's very difficult, you know, and my costume designer really went totally crazy. But finally, it's a really, really very beautiful one, because I think it's not cheap in the sense that this is not, you know, some woman who ran a kind of shady place in Beirut. This is a classy woman, even though what is class? You know, we don't really know. You never really know who Lena was, except, okay, her father, she gave up on some money. Her mother died when she was young. But I have to say, even though I wrote all these words for her, but I wouldn't trust anything she says. So
I will add that the red, of course, plays just such a contrast for Neta's
You wear blue.
character. You wear blue. Hers is like a bright color. Yours is a very.
The costume had actually a color palette of both of us, which was very different and
Very different. I mean, her with the makeup, and you kind of having it played
No
a nice contrast.
yeah, I think the whole film was, on a filmic level, was really, on a design level, the film was very carefully worked out. You know, all the colors you see in the apartment, it was all really, although it's not even an apartment, it was a house. We converted into a fourth floor apartment, but every color you see on the screen, every piece of cloth, every piece of furniture was very carefully worked out. And I think my inspiration, I have to say, in that sense, not a very popular name these days, but Roman Polanski made so many films that, Rosemary's Baby and Tenant, and so many films where really it's about this claustrophobic feeling, which is really, it's not about the environment, it's about how your mind operates in these kind of conditions.
I could see a lot of Polanski there, definitely. I want to close it just with one last question. Just as far as Israeli production goes, one of the things that's amazing about this is an international production. It looks and feels that way. I mean, I thought that Matt Damon could walk in at any moment and be.
He did. I cut him out.
Yeah, he cut him out. He cut him out. I understand that he's just. The contrast with the women,
he's just being shot from the back, but he's there.
But it really felt like this international film. It takes place everywhere, and it looks like you shot it everywhere. And one could say, okay, this is the opening of the Israel Film Center Festival, and is this an Israeli film? What made this film Israeli for you?
Well,
I think there was hardly any Hebrew in the film.
there's very little Hebrew.
Our Ulpan teacher here is very disappointed at the level of Hebrew in the film.
Yes. Well, I'll say two things. One, I'll go back to the Syrian Bride again. Because I made films like Cup Final, which was you could say an international film, was an Israeli captured by Palestinians during the war in Lebanon. It was shown all around the world. It was mostly in English because they communicated in English, the Israeli and the Palestinians. And yet it was an Israeli film, there was no doubt. After that, I made Zohar, which was a film about an Israeli singer, actually my biggest success domestically, still, 25 years ago. And funnily enough, I saw it on the El Al plane coming in here. It's funny. It was nice. It was actually very moving to see it on a plane. And
It's better on the big screen, I promise.
it is, yeah. Yeah, I'm not supposed to tell these kind of things, huh? And when I did the Syrian Bride, I was actually getting involved with Germans and French producers and finance, and I had guilt feelings. I sort of said, maybe I should bring in a German element or a French element, and they said, no, a good story is a good story. And I think that's where it starts and that's where it ends. A good story is a good story, and if you do it properly and you have the best cast that you can get, then it's a good story. Now, this is not, because I did have 3 years ago, I met a producer in Los Angeles, and he said two things: Mossad, no; CIA. And I said, no, come on. He said, no, Mossad, who cares about the Mossad? CIA. And two, he said, well, the scene where she kisses her, you should go a bit further there. And I said, no way, that's so kind of expected. I want to go in a different direction. And obviously he was not involved in the film. Now, I'm sure if we asked the people here, some people would say, yes, you should have gone a bit further in that sense. But for me, this was okay. But the film is really all about nuance. And I think nuance in the end is what wins over an international audience. And at the end of the day, whether it's a Syrian bride crossing a border, or it's a woman protecting her lemon trees against the Israeli defense minister, or it's an Arab kid growing up in near Jerusalem and going to a Jewish school, all my characters are essentially Israeli. I'm Israeli, and the film comes, I think, at the end of the day, from an Israeli point of view. But I also learned over the years that the more local you keep it, the more authentic you keep it, the more universally it reaches. It has a more universal reach. Because people are much more educated than we think. And if they're not, they have access to knowledge very easily these days. So I think, a global audience, I really feel that when I show my films, it can be Beijing, it can be, South America, North America, anywhere in the world. I never get people sort of saying, what? What is this? It's the questions are, is Mona dead or not? But that's legitimate, so.
Eran, thank you very much. Neta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, folks, join us up in the gallery, in the lobby, for some food and celebration. We look forward to seeing you throughout the week, and please help spread the word. Quickest way up is up the stairs and then up the other flight of stairs. And celebrate with us and join us throughout the week. Have a good night.